So what is an external CSS? So the name itself indicates, so that is an external. So external is nothing but, so we generally use the CSS files and we directly use them. So CSS used from the external files. So there are two ways yesterday we worked on. So one is inline CSS. Inline CSS is a CSS so applied in the same line of attack, and whereas in internal CSS, so we declare a separate classes, and using the classes we call the class names, and so that the CSS will be applied. So that is for reusability. So internal CSS is the reusability in the entire Visual Force page. So whereas in external CSS, the advantage is it is a reusability in the entire Salesforce organization. So an external CSS can be used in any Visual Force page in the total organization, in the entire Salesforce organization, and the CSS can be used anywhere in any Visual Force page. So reusability in the entire Salesforce organization. So once you define a CSS, the CSS can be reused in a number of pages. So don't need to declare again and again. So let's say, so you are working a company, you are building a company website, or you have the multiple navigations. So a website has a multiple navigation. So based on the clicks, so you need to, so you will visit the web pages. So if multiple pages are having the same CSS, I mean same colors, same themes, same logos, or most of the screens are looks similar, so which means we are using the same CSS in that case. So when you are building the web pages or Visual Force pages, if you find a common CSS in number of places in multiple pages, then better to go for an external CSS. External CSS is a common CSS that can be used in a number of pages. So it is an external file. So an external file that can be referred in our Visual Force pages. So the same external file can be referred in n number of pages. So this is an external. The name itself is an external. So which comes from the external system. So system is nothing but it can be from the local drive, and it can be downloaded from the online. So it can be shared by your customers. So the CSS must be in the file format. So it should be in the file. So what are the steps to implement the external CSS? One is identify your CSS file. So identify your CSS file. So which means if you don't have the file, you just create a file. If you have a file, just identify what is the file you are using. So I don't have a file as of now. I would like to create a new file. So to create a new file, simply you just open a notepad file. You just open a notepad file, and what are the CSS that you would like to use? Go to our Visual Force page, and here yesterday I wrote two CSS classes. So one is a label 1 and another one is a label 2. So label 1 having some attributes and label 2 having some attributes. So this is an internal CSS. So I would like to declare so these two files as an external. So let's say these are the two CSS classes that I am going to use in number of pages. So when you declare an internal CSS, So the internal CSS is common to entire Visual Force page. So this is a reusable piece of CSS that can be common in a number of that can be common in the entire page. So now we cannot use the same CSS. I mean, so if you want to use the same CSS in some other file, so I mean in some other Visual Force application, so you need to declare the same attributes. So in internal CSS, you need to repeat the if you don't mind, can you please mute your lines? Yeah, thank you. So if you want to use the same CSS classes, so you need to declare the same CSS classes in some other Visual Force application. So I don't want to declare the same CSS. Let's say there are 10 pages uses the same CSS. So always declaring the same classes increases your code. So that is not a best practice. So when you have 10 pages, all are having the same CSS, better to declare as an external CSS. So when you declare as an external CSS, that external CSS is common to n number of pages. We just define the external CSS file name so that you can directly working with your CSS files. So let me show you. The first step is identify your CSS files. So as of now I don't have any files in my mission, any CSS files. So I would like to create a new file using these classes. So I'm just removing from the application, just remove it. Even I don't want to declare any style internal CSS, save it. Now I just removed CSS classes. That's where I don't see any colors or font attributes which are applied to these labels. There are no labels here. So just create a file. So I'm creating a new file with all the CSS classes. In case if you want to declare any number of classes, you just do it here. So one is a label 1 and another one is a label 2 and another one is a main title. Let's say it's a main title attribute, and I would like to add some bigger font. Let's say it is 25 pixels and which is in bold font. So like this you just declare a number of classes in a file. So separate the classes. So in case if you want to apply the same CSS, so for a number of attributes, so define your CSS classes here. So this is for title and this is for label 1 and this is for label 2. Like that, if you want to declare n number of classes, just put it in a single file. And I'm just adding the CSS in a class notes. So identifying is nothing but create a new CSS file with the below CSS classes. So these are the classes. So these are the classes, three classes I defined. So label 1 has green color and font is 15 pixels and font is bold, and label 2 has blue 12 pixels and normal font. Main title has blue, or you just change, if you want to change the color you can do it. Main title has a blue 25 pixels because it's a title, that's why the font is bigger and it should be in the bold font. So just create a file with these CSS classes. So this is step 1. So here is the file, and you must, so you remember always save the file with the .css extension so that the file becomes a CSS file. So if you don't use this .css, that becomes a normal notepad file. So just use .css extension. I'm going to save this. Save as. So put somewhere in your local drive where you are looking to store. So you can store anywhere. So this is my demo.css. So my demo.css is a CSS file name. Then save it. Now I have a CSS file. So then the step 2. So there is a there is a storage space called static resources. Upload the CSS files into static resources. So say static resource. So here is a new term called static resource, and static resource is a database area. So you find the static resource here. So in the develop menu, so you have the static resource, and which is a database area. So where you can upload CSS files, JavaScript files, or logos or images which are referred in your applications. So let's say as of now I have a CSS file in my local drive. So but I am building an application in the cloud platform. So how can you deal with the local files? So you just simply upload those files from the local drive to a static resource, and the static resource has some connection with our application, so that you can refer any file from the static resource. So that is a static resource. It act as a mediator for our local files and our cloud files. Like we simply upload all the files to static resource, and from the static resource the application receives the required files. So I have a one file now. So let's move.
Nara, can we make multiple folders inside static resources?
Yeah, we can have the multiple folders. So you can have the multiple folders, and so if you have the multiple folders, so just refer the path. You need to refer the path.
No, multiple folders inside this static resources. So for example, if we have multiple applications and have multiple CSS files, and I want to separate those CSS files within this static resources, so can I create some folder inside this static resources so that I can separate those CSS or JavaScript files?
No, so static resource is a common place. You need to upload everything. So within the static resource, if you wanted to separate your files, so just what you can do is what are the files that you have, just create a zip file and you just upload in the static resource. So zip can have group of files. A group refers to a single application. So that can be so when you are using consuming those files from the static resource, you just specify the path. So when you have multiple files in a single folder, the zip is nothing but it's a kind of folder. You need to refer the file path. You need to refer the complete file path, right? So here is a static resource. Click on new. So choose your file. Choose your file. So go to the folder where you have the CSS file. So here is a my demo. So my demo is my file name. It's a CSS file name. You just enter one name. So if you have a zip folder, so just upload the zip file into the static resource and make it public always. So public means any users in the organization they can access. So even an external users. So we have a concept called forge.com sites. So using the forge.com sites, we can build the public websites. Even public users are not part of the Salesforce users. Even in the public websites, these static resources are available to work on. So So by default, so we generally make it as a public always. So public means it is accessible to all the users. So the name is ext css. So you can specify any name here, but remember the file name. So because we use this file name to consume the CSS file in your application, then save it. So here is the CSS file. So when you click on view, so it will show you multiple CSS classes. So label 1 and label 2 and the main title. So it has three separate classes. So if you wanted to use main title, or if you wanted to use label 1 and label 2, first you need to refer this CSS file in your application. So to refer the CSS file, so I just uploaded the file to static resource. So to refer the CSS file in your application, we need to use apex style sheet attribute. Use apex style sheet to access any of the static resource file. So I'm going to here, so just declare apex style sheet and value equal to dollar resource dot and your file name. My file name is extcss. So this is the standard declaration. So here dollar resource. So dollar resource is a standard and global object, so which always refers a static resource. So this is a static resource. So any file from the static resource can be accessed using the dollar resource. It's a standard keyword which always links to the static resource, and the file name is extcss. So which means from the static resource. So if it is a style sheet, Apex style sheets indicates only CSS files. If it is a .css file, so we have to use a style sheet. Style sheet is for CSS files, and the dollar resource is a static resource, and it is your file name. So this is a standard syntax. Save it. Now I can see the colors. So how it applies. So this declaration inherits the entire CSS file into your application, so that when you use the label 1 and label 2, so label 1 and label 2 is a part of the CSS file, so that's why the colors are applied. So if you want to use main title, just copy your class name, go to your application. So here is the title, and for this title I don't want to use this inline CSS. I would like to use external CSS. Just declare your class name, then save it. Now you see the difference. It's a bigger font, and also it has the different font colors, so that I have chosen in my class name. So this is the way we generally use an external CSS when you have the multiple pages follow the same CSS classes. So upload the files to static resources anytime, so which are accessible through Apex style sheet attribute. So this is the style sheet attribute for the external CSS files. So this static resource, so it is a database area where you can load .css, .js or JS, images, logos which are used in application, which are used in your applications. It's a database area.
Can we use any other file also, like HTML, HTML?
So we cannot use the HTML. So it allows only few formats. So it allows a text file, CSS, JavaScript, images. So images in all formats. So which means even logos comes into the images area. So not HTML files. So there are some limitations. So it allows only few. So just go to help for this page.